Welcome to Walking the Haftarah. I'm Tyler Merwin, and this is Torah Portion TETZAVEH. This week's portion is Exodus 27:20 through 30:10. Our Haftarah this week is Ezekiel 43:10 through 27. TETZAVEH means "you shall command," is an opening line of our Torah portion that reads, "You shall command the people of Israel that they bring you pure beaten olive oil for the light, that a lamp may be regularly set up to burn." Exodus 27, verse 20. Last week, we looked at some of the key pieces of constructing the Mishkan, or tabernacle, along with Solomon's building of the Beit HaMikdash, which is the temple. This week, we'll focus on the priesthood that is required for the function of the tabernacle, and the Haftarah will look into the final temple that was given prophetically to the prophet Ezekiel. So let's recap this week's Torah portion. Our portion begins with commandments related to the menorah. The line we read in verse 20, that a lamp may regularly be set up to burn, in Hebrew is Allah Ner Tamid. Ner Tamid literally translates eternal flame or eternal light. Eternal having the sense of continual or without ceasing. Allah here is translated as burn, but it means to ascend or to go up. So the regular service of the holy menorah was for the eternal flame or light to go up or be elevated to Adonai, and also for the light of the Holy One to be elevated for Israel and for the whole world to see. Then bring near to you Aaron your brother and his sons with him from among the people of Israel, to serve me as priests, Aaron and Aaron's sons, Nadab, Abihu, Eleazar, and Ithamar. Exodus 28:1. Aaron and his 4 sons were selected by Adonai as the initial priesthood. And you shall make holy garments for Aaron your brother, for glory and for beauty. You shall speak to all the skillful whom I have filled with the spirit of skill, that they may make Aaron's garments to consecrate him for my priesthood. Exodus 28:2 and 3. Aaron is the high priest, or the Kohen Gadol, and his garments are required by the Holy One to minister to him in the service of the Mishkan. The Kohen Gadol wore 8 vestments, or also known as gold vestments, for his normal priestly duties. These are the ephod, the breastplate, the robe, the tunic, a turban, a belt, a crown, and pants. He would first put on his pants to keep modesty, because we're told in Exodus 20:26, "And you shall not go up by steps to my altar, that your nakedness be not exposed to it." Then he would put on his tunic, which is a robe-like undergarment, and then the robe on top of that. The robe had a hem of golden bells and pomegranates. Then he would put on the ephod, with a belt which hung around his waist, and had shoulder straps that came up his back and over his shoulders and connected to the breastplate. On the shoulder straps were 2 onyx stones, or shoham stones, one on each shoulder, with the 12 names of the 12 tribes inscribed on them, 6 tribes on each shoulder. Thus he represented and carried the 12 tribes of Israel before the Holy One in ministry. The breastplate also had 12 precious stones in it to represent the tribes individually, engraved with their names on them. There was a pocket or a fold behind the breastplate where the Urim and the Thummim were kept, next to the Kohen Gadol's heart. The sages say that Urim means light, and Thummim means completeness, and that it was physically a parchment containing the name or names of the Holy One. This sitting between the Kohen's heart and the breastplate was said to be the reason that the breastplate stones lit up, giving the high priest true discernment and guidance. So the breastplate was powered by complete light, another hint to the first day of creation. Then the Kohen Gadol would place or wrap the turban on his head, and finally would place the golden crown on the turban that was engraved, "Holy to Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh." It shall be on Aaron's forehead, and Aaron shall bear any guilt from the holy things that the people of Israel consecrate as their holy gifts. It shall regularly be on his forehead, that they may be accepted before Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. Exodus 28:38. Next we get the garments for the regular priests, Aaron's sons. The regular priestly garments consisted of 4 individual garments. That was a tunic, pants, a hat, and a belt. Now this is what you shall do to them to consecrate them, that they may serve me as priests. Exodus 29:1. The priesthood, like the tabernacle, had to be consecrated for service by Moses. Most of chapter 29 lays out the 7-day sacrificial service to consecrate the priesthood. First, they were washed, then dressed, and then anointed with oil. Then the sacrifices began with a bull and then 2 lambs. And you shall kill the ram and take part of its blood and put it on the tip of the right ear of Aaron, and on the tips of the right ears of his sons, and on the thumbs of their right hands, and on the great toes of their right feet, and throw the rest of the blood against the sides of the altar. Exodus 29:20. The sages say, through the ear one hears and understands, through the hand one acts, through the feet one moves about. All 3 are consecrated to show that the Kohen dedicates all his faculties to God's service. Next we are given the command of the tamid, which means eternal or continual, offering. This is the morning lamb and the evening lamb offerings that are the bookends of the daily tabernacle or temple service. This is also what the morning, which is 9 o'clock or 3rd hour, and the evening, which is 3 o'clock or 9th hour prayers are modeled after. I will consecrate the tent of meeting and the altar. Aaron also and his sons I will consecrate to serve me as priests. I will dwell among the people of Israel, and will be their God. And they shall know that I am Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh their God, who brought them out of the land of Egypt, that I might dwell among them. I am Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh their God. Exodus 29:44-46. The portion ends with the plans for the incense altar, also known as the golden altar or the inner altar. Like the tamid offering, incense was to be burned before the Holy One morning and evening every day. And like the other articles of the holy place, it was made of acacia wood and overlaid with pure gold. I've always seen the placement, what Holissus taught us in Hebrew as smikut, and words placement, like where they put it in the texture, in the context of the scripture, of this golden altar as being akin to a spiritual door. In other words, it was much earlier we talked about the Ark of the Covenant, we talked about the table of showbread, we talked about the menorah, kind of all together, which are all in the same place. Well, the golden altar is also in that same area, but it's not spoken of until a little bit later now. And so being akin to a spiritual door, it's kind of like when you built a nice house, kind of the finishing touch to complete it is to have that very beautiful front door to enter in. Except this door, which is the incense service, opens into the presence of the Almighty Himself. So that's how I see why it's placed where it's placed, the completion. This brings us to our Haftarah this week, which is Ezekiel 43:10-27. Our Haftarah is short this week. It's only 17 verses and speaks mainly of the altar of the future temple. But before we go there, let's back up to where Ezekiel first gets this vision for these divine plans. The visions and details for the temple are found in chapter 40 through chapter 48. So let's look at Ezekiel 40, beginning in verse 1. In the 25th year of our exile, at the beginning of the year, on the 10th day of the month, in the 14th year after the city was struck down, on that very day the hand of Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh was upon me, and he brought me to the city. It was 25 years since the exile of King Jehoiakim, and they are living in exile in Babylon. It says it was at the beginning of the year, which would be the 7th month, or Tishri. And it says it was on the 10th day of the month, and the 10th of Tishri is Yom Kippur. Even in exile, this would have been a day where Ezekiel and the rest of his brethren would be fasting, praying, and seeking the Holy One to forgive their transgressions. This time was also believed to be an actual Jubilee or Yovel year, which is significant, because Yom Kippur on a Jubilee year would signal the freeing of all slaves and returning all of the land back to its original owners. The Holy One uses this backdrop and setting to show Ezekiel the messianic setting in which in the future Jubilee will release his people into a final redemption. In visions of God, he brought me to the land of Israel, and he set me down on a very high mountain, on which was a structure like a city to the south. He brought me there. Behold, there was a man whose appearance was like bronze, with a linen cord and a measuring reed in his hand. And he was standing in the gateway. And the man said to me, Son of man, look with your eyes and hear with your ears, and set your heart upon all that I shall show you. For you were brought here in order that I might show it to you. Declare all that you see to the house of Israel. Ezekiel 40, verses 2 through 4. Ezekiel is addressed as Son of Man, or Ben Adam, throughout the book, and he is the only prophet addressed this way. It's thought to be a term of favor and endearment, but also it was a term to keep him humble because of all the mighty visions that he was shown. Now that we have the intro, let's jump back to Ezekiel 43. But let's begin just before our portion, at the beginning of chapter 43. Then he led me to the gate facing east. And behold, the glory of the God of Israel was coming from the east. And the sound of his coming was like the sound of many waters, and the earth shone with his glory. And the vision I saw was just like the vision that I had seen when he came to destroy the city, and just like the vision that I had seen by Tabarkanel, and I fell on my face. Ezekiel 43, 1 through 3. I can only imagine what Ezekiel must have felt seeing the vision and hearing the sound of the awesome presence of the Holy One. As the glory of Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh entered the temple by the gate facing east, the Spirit lifted me up and brought me into the inner court. And behold, the glory of Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh filled the temple. Verses 4 and 5. The Spirit, or Ruach, is also wind. So you could say that the Spirit wind carried him into the inner court. While the man was standing beside me, I heard one speaking to me out of the temple. And he said to me, Son of man, this is the place of my throne, and the place of the soles of my feet, where I will dwell in the midst of the people of Israel forever. And the house of Israel shall no more defile my holy name, neither they nor their kings, by their whoring and by their dead bodies of their kings and their high places, by setting their threshold by my threshold, and their doorposts by my doorposts, with only a wall between me and them. They have defiled my holy name by their abominations that they have committed, so I have consumed them in my anger. Now let them put away their whoring, and the dead bodies of their kings far from me, and I will dwell in their midst forever. Verses 6 through 9. Adonai speaks to Ezekiel from the Holy of Holies. In earlier times, the kings built their palaces next to or very near the actual temple. Many of the kings, I won't say most of the kings, fell into excess and idolatry, which all occurred in close proximity to the holy temple. Also, it was a custom for some of these kings to be buried in their own gardens, also near the temple. So this close proximity of death and idolatry brought defilement to the holiness of the temple. But the future house of Adonai will not have this issue. So that's the backdrop. Let's now begin this week's Haftarah reading. As for you, son of man, describe to the house of Israel the temple, that they may be ashamed of their iniquities, and they shall measure the plan. Verse 10. Those in exile should feel ashamed, because it was their own sins and disregard for Adonai's holiness that brought about the destruction of the first temple. This should bring about repentance and a contrite heart, which is the state of one worthy to build the holy temple. And if they are ashamed of all that they have done, make known to them the design of this temple, its arrangement, its exits, and its entrances. That is the whole design. And make known to them as well as all its statutes and its whole design and all its laws. And write it down in their sight, so they may observe all its laws and all its statutes and carry them out. Verse 11. Just like the laws concerning the priesthood comprise the majority of the book of Leviticus, and all Israel was expected to learn and study it, though most weren't actually priests, so too it's expected that all that call upon the name of the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob would also study the design of the future Messianic temple. This is the law of the temple. The whole territory on top of the mountain, all around, shall be most holy. Behold, this is the law of the temple. In the millennial reign, with Yeshua ruling, there will not be any contamination anywhere near or around the mountain of the temple. So the whole area will remain in a state of holiness. These are the measurements of the altar by cubits, the cubit being a cubit and a handbreadth. Its base shall be 1 cubit high and 1 cubit broad, with a rim of 1 span around its edge. And this shall be the height of the altar. Verse 13. We begin with the measurements of the altar. The measurements were usually in handbreadths and cubits. There are generally 2 types of cubits used, a 5 handbreadth cubit and a 6 handbreadth cubit. Generally, like we mentioned before, it's anywhere from 18 to 24 inches in our modern measurements. It says that the shorter cubit is actually the approximate distance from your elbow to your fingers. That's what's used here, but what's used here is actually the longer cubit, which is the cubit being the 5 handbreadth cubit plus an extra handbreadth, making it a 6 handbreadth cubit. From the base on the ground to the lower edge, 2 cubits, with a handbreadth of 1 cubit, and from the smaller ledge to the larger ledge, 4 cubits with a handbreadth of 1 cubit, and the altar hearth, 4 cubits, and from the altar hearth projecting upward, 4 horns. The altar hearth shall be square, 12 cubits long and 12 broad. The ledge also shall be square, 14 cubits long and 14 broad, with a rim around it, half a cubit broad, and its base 1 cubit all around. The steps of the altar shall face east. Verses 14 through 17. The altar location and its orientation is the same as the first and the second temples. And he said to me, Son of man, thus says the Lord Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, these are the ordinances of the altar. On the day when it is erected, for offering burnt offerings upon it, and for throwing blood against it, you shall give to the Levitical priest of the family of Zadok, who draw near to me to minister to me, declares the Lord Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, a bull from the herd for a sin offering. Verses 18 and 19. Zadok was a priest for King David and a counterpart to Nathan the prophet. Since Messiah is seen in the light of King David, it makes sense that the line of Zadok would also be the priesthood. And you shall take some of its blood and put it on the 4 horns of the altar, and on the 4 corners of the ledge, and upon the rim all around. Thus you shall purify the altar and make atonement for it. You shall also take the bull of the sin offering, and it shall be burned in the appointed place belonging to the temple, outside the sacred area. Verses 20 and 21. This is the first day inauguration service. And on the second day you shall offer a male goat without blemish for a sin offering, and the altar shall be purified, as it was purified with the bull. When you have finished purifying it, you shall offer a bull from the herd without blemish, and a ram from the flock without blemish. You shall present them before Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, and the priest shall sprinkle salt on them and offer them up as a burnt offering to Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. Verses 22 through 24. This is the second day of the inauguration service. For 7 days you shall provide daily a male goat for a sin offering, also a bull from the herd and a ram from the flock. Without blemish shall be provided. 7 days shall they make atonement for the altar and cleanse it, and so consecrate it. Verses 25 and 26. Just like our Torah portion, the priesthood had a 7-day inauguration service, and here is a similar 7-day inauguration service for the altar. And when they have completed these days, then from the 8th day onward, the priest shall offer on the altar your burnt offerings and your peace offerings, and I will accept you, declares the Lord. Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. Verse 27. With this, the altar is cleansed and dedicated for its holy work. Let us be cleansed and dedicated to the Holy One, a vessel to be used by the Holy One. Let us look forward to our future service under King Messiah Yeshua, the Prince of Peace, in His holy temple. I pray this teaching has been edifying. Let's lift up the name of the Holy One with love in Echad. Shalom.